All right. Ike and I are joined tonight with occultist and magical practitioner David Sherb. He's also a counselor for his nonprofit Asunder Outreach. So it's good to meet you, David. I've checked into you a little bit, and I'm aware that you come from a family of Scottish folk magic as well as masonry. But maybe you could elaborate a little bit more about yourself and your background, just to give our listeners a bit of a feel for yourself.
Yes, my mother was a immigrant from Wales. She's Scottish, Norwegian, and German. And one of the biggest influences on me was my mother and my grandmother Smith. The Masonic connection is my uncle. He was very influential. His name was Cleve, great man. Was very influential on me as a young man, very helpful, very generous. He was a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason. And my father was also involved in the Masons, and my mother was Eastern Star. It impacted me a great deal because what the Masons do from my end, I mean, I am not a practicing Mason, but what I learned from them is how to be a better man. Ethics, morality, how to conduct yourself in the world, and how to be generous and how to give back. So they were very influential on me.
That's it's fantastic to hear. I'm a Mason, and so it's good to hear this stuff from non-Masons, because it's obviously there's always this skepticism when somebody who's part of the in group tries to defend it. It's particularly with something like Masonry, but I find that very interesting. I wasn't fully aware that you had that sort of close dealing with Masonry. So in terms of general occultism and the stuff that you practice, where what's your background there? How'd you get started in these traditions?
Well, one of the catalysts that kind of projected me into another direction, and let me make it clear because there has to be a disconnection here. Um, the Masons are demonized a lot unnecessarily in the media because people aren't informed about what they actually do. So when I was 17, my father died, and that was a catalyst that changed the trajectory of my life. At 17, it got very hard for my mother and I. We had to go to food banks. It was very difficult. I worked one crappy job after another. And around 19, I got involved in the S&M community. And the reason why is to channel my pain into something where pain into power. That's been the theme of my whole life. In that community, I met my mentor. His name was Master V. I'm not going to say his full name because he has passed. In that culture, which is a very close-knit culture, they did literally that. They showed me how to turn pain into power, but he also mentored me. He helped me to develop my intellectual abilities. I walked in there, I had a 78 IQ. I didn't know what to do with my life. I was alone and I was broken. And he's the one who introduced me to the writings of Friedrich Nietzsche and Ayn Rand and Larry Townsend. And he was a big influence on me. And I had some issues, some real issues. And when I would get impatient or angry with him, he would just basically say, come back in a couple of days. You need to get out of here. And then when I would return, he was never confrontational. He was never cruel. He was like, are you done? So in that community, I ran across another friend of mine. Well, we're no longer friends. I'm not going to say his full name. We'll just say his first name, Michael. And he was involved in the Church of Satan. So we're 2 for 2 here. And, back then, if you got involved with the Church of Satan, it was that you send your 35 bucks in, you get a sticker and a certificate, and you're a member. But he had a little bit of a pull with the Pennsylvania branch of the Church of Satan. So I spent 2 years doing that also. So I'm going like full dark side now. I'm full left-handed path. And to be honest with the COS, I just got bored because they're not really spiritual. They're more atheistic. It's no secret that Friedrich Nietzsche was a huge influence on Anton LaVey, and so was Ayn Rand. But the thing that I found boring about it is, they didn't give the devil his due. It was just basically narcissistic, dull, and I got bored and moved on. Well, while I was connected to them, I got involved in a Luciferian group This would have been around 1986. I was 24. And I stayed with them all the way to the year 2012. And I'm not going to say the name of the order because the order is gone now. But what caused me to leave the Luciferian order in 2012 is it became too inclusive. See, when you have an order, a magical order, exclusion is as important as inclusion. So if you let everybody in and you have no vetting, then it has no baseline. It just becomes scattered. But the difference is with the Luciferian order was we know that Lucifer and Satan are two different archetypes. And what made me gravitate towards the Luciferian order was it was very Promethean, developing oneself, one's true will. It was looking at your own crap. And it honed discipline in me. It honed focus in me. The one thing that I learned in that order, and this isn't an attack in any way, but they knew the Bible better than most Christians do. You know, that saying that the greatest theologian that ever lived next to Christ was Lucifer, because he knows the Bible like the back of his hand. Again, if you're talking archetypally or spiritually. And then in 2012, when the order broke up, I was having some other personal issues, kind of wavering, drinking too much, got addicted to painkillers. And around 2014 is when I started doing the outreach, Asunder outreach. I started going down to West 25th, working with gangbangers, the Latin Kings, the Swing on Sight family, and you know, what they would consider, which I did not, but the throwaways. And in working with them, by God's grace and a lot of work, I developed a little bit of a reputation working with people who had these kind of issues. And then I got sponsorship and started doing my own outreach, Asunder outreach, and was going really, really well. I would have up to 60 people in my backyard on a Tuesday and Thursday. And then 2020, the event came, which we know what that was. And over 10 years of work just flushed down the toilet. So I didn't know what I was going to do. I lost my purpose. And then one of the students in the Asunder group started putting my stuff on social media, said, you know, you need to start talking, get your work out there. So the talks that I was doing to the young people and in my counseling, I started doing on Instagram. And it gave me a catalyst to keep doing my purpose, you know, helping other people, trying to, in whatever fractional way I could, to make a difference. So now I've got an opportunity here in Georgia, working with Thomas Global Media and doing podcast work and doing the same work I did back in Cleveland, except on a larger scale. And I'm very grateful to be here doing this. So that's where I'm at right now.
I want to jump in and ask you a question. It might not be that interesting related to what you're just talking about just there, but I had heard you mentioned on a podcast I was listening, you were an investigator for the Department of Transportation or something like that?
I worked at DOT for 20 years. I was a traffic investigation, accident response. I retired from there was June 2001.
That's
So that was my day job.
Yeah. So, as you said, there was this sort of deviation from this original sort of Promethean intent and this kind of more disciplined iteration versus the current state of this like all inclusivity and political correctness sort of thing that kind of bummed you out about I don't know if it was the Luciferian organization or the Church of Satan or both that you had mentioned. And it seems like that's something that's kind of permeating into not just esoteric orders these days, but it's kind of permeating into just a lot of groups in general with, you know, what we would call wokeism and things along these lines. And I'm curious if you currently are a part of any other orders or organizations and just what you have to say or speak to in general about your kind of perception and perspective on uh, these sort of things. If you could elaborate a little bit more on like why it is that this is an issue in your estimation.
Well, I mean, the thing it's no secret that when you look on social media, TikTok, Instagram, there's a lot of people claiming to be practitioners, but they haven't been initiated. They haven't paid their dues. And there's a lot of misinformation out there too. And with that, everybody decides to give themselves a title without doing the work. I mean, with the Masons, you have to be initiated. You have to learn. You have to go through the process. Removing the process, removing the vetting, then you have no baseline. So there's a lot of, I don't know, I could say the word is LARPers out there when it comes to magic and when it comes to doing this type of work. And what's also missing a great deal with young people is mentoring. Young women need to be mentored, young men need to be mentored. And I don't mean just in the occult or in magic or in faith or whatever those vocations are. They need to be mentored in life. They're lost right now. And the work that I'm trying to do now here is to reach that on a larger scale. Like even in the counseling work that I did, the two things I dealt with the most and still deal with is loneliness and trauma. And it's like a loop that goes over and over again. And I've said before, when it comes to the occult or magic or things like that, most people need a therapist more than they do magic.
True, very true. I find it interesting this idea of ideally, I think what we are aimed at is centering ourselves, but without becoming self-centered and kind of, orienting one's purpose, yet not accruing an overinflated ego in the midst of it. And I wonder if you have anything to speak to in those regards.
Well, I mean, it's also like people like I say when it comes to magic and things like that, everything is 6 degrees of Aleister Crowley. Whether you like Crowley or not, his name comes up in everything. You know, everybody thinks they're connected to him when they start, doing magic, or they'll say, they want to do the drugs first without doing the work. They want to be counterculture, but they can't get the basics down. So when it comes to magic or faith or your purpose, I mean, you got to get the basics down. If you can't pay your light bill, if you can't keep a roof over your head, if you can't stabilize your life, these things aren't going to be the answer to you. Got to get the basics down first. And that's the trouble right now. People can't get the basics down because they're hurting, they're in survival mode, they're suffering. And I understand that. I know what it's like to be broke. I know what it's like to be alone. But a lot of times they're turning to things that aren't going to help them. When what they really need, again, reiterating, they need a therapist, they need help, they need somebody to talk to. So when it comes to magic or the occult or these things, they have to be cautious that it doesn't become a crutch. And then when you talk about being overly inflated, everybody's going to be the next practitioner that doesn't fail. Well, it takes a lot of discipline to be a practitioner. And again, if you can't get the basics in life down, you shouldn't be trying magic or any of these other arts.
Yeah, here. Yeah, absolutely. I was I was in recovery for many years for drugs and alcohol, and one of the things actually, and I didn't it didn't dawn on me until I moved to Asheville. I moved from New York to Asheville, North Carolina. I lived in New York. Yeah, I lived in New York City for many years, and then I grew up on Long Island, and we moved down there. And the thing is, I love Asheville, and there was an occult and magical renaissance happening there when we moved that I had never seen before. Not even in New York City, right? Because like you're saying, in New York City, everybody was 6 degrees of Crowley and kind of this odd, inclusive Luciferian, or I want to say maybe like sarcastic, satanic sort of thing. But there was a real, sincere occult renaissance going on there. But at the same time, because Asheville has a history of being a place where people go to first New Yorkers really down there were the Vanderbilts because Cornelius Vanderbilt, I believe his wife had like some like tuberculosis and lung problems. She went down there because there was a specialist named Dr. Battle, and the mountain air and the doctor's therapies healed her. And so they loved it so much they planted their flag. And since then, really, Asheville has become a community that is centered around healing. And I went down there and I was only half healed because it was around COVID, and my Alcoholics Anonymous groups and all that stuff destroyed because of COVID, destroyed because I had no more support. The net completely fell out from underneath me. But what I saw in Asheville that I hadn't seen anywhere else was an addiction to healing and never becoming healed. There's a community there that is obsessed with the idea. They victimize their own sort of vulnerable state, and so I do things like initiation and I do things like recovery in order to get where I'm going and move forward and level up. And it just seemed like everyone there had to keep a 15-foot bubble around themselves because they were like the thinnest piece of glass. And if either of them walked too close to each other, both would simultaneously shatter. So is that something that you've encountered as well? You don't seem like the type of guy who would run, stuff like that. But I'm sure you've seen it.
I mean, on a personal level, I mean, I have PTSD and bipolar disease, and I've battled alcoholism on and off my whole life. But when it comes to these things, whether it's magic or faith or whatever context you want to use, it isn't a cure. It just gives you the tools to deal with it. But a lot of people, they're just addicted to their trauma. They identify with their trauma. It's like if you take away their trauma, you take away their pain, then they feel like they have no identity. I remember going to AA meetings and you would see like, I'd go to different AA meetings at different churches and you would see the same speaker going over and over again. They got addicted to telling their story in place of getting healed. I mean, the wounded healer eventually has to get healed and start healing others.
Right.
But you can get addicted to your trauma. You can get addicted to your pain. And what we've seen the last 4 years is people getting addicted to being a victim. It's like a trend. Look at me, I'm a victim. Look at how much I'm suffering. It's like, okay, let's stop one-upping the victimhood and let's start working with each other to get healthy and move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, even with some of the AA meetings, I mean, you're aware, they're not even effective anymore. They're just cope circles.
Yep. Yep. And God forbid, NA, right? Those are even dangerous because people try and sell you drugs in the parking lot.
Yeah, my counselor at AA, he was a Vietnam vet. And I was really good for showing up at AA meetings drunk. And he would come right up to me. I'm not going to use the language, obviously, here, but he would say certain expletives and say, no, you can go sit your drunk ass back there. But he never threw me out of the meetings.
Mm.
And that's another reason why, too, is I love Bukowski's writings. Mm-hmm. And the reason why, I tell people, Bukowski is a true magician. He's a true magus. And why? Because Bukowski could take his pain and his addiction and create some of the most incredible writing I've ever read. And what makes his writing incredible is it's direct. He channeled it into something where people could go, oh, yeah, I mean, I understand what he's saying. So like somebody like Charles Bukowski, he is a true teacher, and he didn't even realize he was one. Because a true teacher and somebody who's truly suffering simplifies the complex.
Yeah, something I was going to say, and you kind of just alluded to it, that I appreciate about you after listening to some of your stuff is, like you said, you're open about your bipolarity, PTSD, things like this, but it seems that you're definitely not allowing yourself to fall into these sort of victim mentalities. And I was going to ask, do you feel like you've found a way to sort of transmute a lot of these things? And then you started talking about this Charles, what was his last name?
Charles Bukowski. He was a great writer. I love his work.
Could you elaborate a little bit on him and some of his work? Because I haven't heard this name before.
Charles Bukowski was a poet and a writer. He was born in 1920. He had a horrible childhood. His father used to beat him half to death with a belt, even for cutting the lawn wrong. He was basically tortured in his childhood. He left home when he was 16, And after he left home, he had severe, severe acne, horrible acne, to where he had to get like scraping treatments for it. And they said it was linked to stress, it was linked to all the other issues he had. He battled alcoholism his whole life, but he also wrote. He wrote some of the most poignant writing I've ever read about his pain and about the people around him. I put up one of his quotes the other day on Instagram. He said, "We are all um, living museums of fear." So his writing impacted me a great deal because why did it impact me? All the work I've ever done by God's grace has been based on one thing, turning pain into power. And he turned it into power. He turned it into powerful writing, impactful writing. So it's like, I like that model where it's like, okay, I'm suffering, I'm in pain, but what can I do with it? How can I project it out into the world? How can I make a difference? I mean, I have my bad days. The thing that helps me with being bipolar and the people around me in my life, I have to communicate. So I'll basically tell them, look, I'm having a really bad day right now. It's not you. I just need to separate for a day or two. If you communicate, you don't offend people.
I think that we all here are adherents to what we would refer to as natural law, and the trappings of the division, destruction, and distraction. And David, something I think that you have a very firm grasp on, according to at least what I've listened to of yourself speak about. And I know this ties right into some of the kind of the woke issues or the all-inclusive issues that we alluded to before, but men and women, masculinity and femininity, and the issues surrounding these things. So when it comes to things like woke culture or the destruction of, that which multiplies, I've heard you speak about via wokeism. What can be said? What's your take on all that?
Natural law, there's two laws. There's natural law and biblical law. Natural law is divine law. Nobody gets away from natural law. Natural law is the seven hermetic laws, the law of rhythm, the law of, cause and effect. But the core of natural law is as you think, as within, so without. So what happened that I noticed back in 2019, there was a collapse on the basic things in life, the basic foundations in life. And the first thing that was attacked was the baseline of men and women. Femininity was attacked and masculinity was attacked. Because, you have to have the polarities in order to move forward. Natural law is based on polarities, men and women. What is feminine? What is masculine? The masculine is primal. The masculine is protective. The masculine is projecting itself forward. The masculine is the sword. The feminine is receptive. The feminine wants to relax. The feminine wants to be in the frame of the masculine and feel safe. Well, there was this attack on both of these primal things. And then you saw the collapse happening. Masculinity, femininity, these are essence. These are embedded in the DNA of people. And when you corrode the masculine and the feminine, then everything else begins to collapse because everything is based on polarity. And so if you take that layer away, then all the rest of natural law begins to be, collapsed. And natural law is not mocked. What we're seeing now is just a correction. That's all. It's natural law. And whether you believe in it or not, it doesn't matter because none of us can supersede it. It's cause and effect. We're all under that. We're all under cause and effect.
Yeah, I think one of the I would say all of the popular ideas that they've kind of managed to get vulnerable, damaged people to swallow, right? Because there's a paradigm. You even look at things like MK Ultra and things like that. The paradigm for being able to reshape a human being in whatever image you want them to be in is to traumatize them. So to introduce trauma is essentially no more difficult than just corroding stability. Human beings without the traditions of stability that we've cultivated over the course of literally like millennia, it's the animal in us takes over. You know, this framework that is now being corroded in the name of oppression. Really, to me, it started in media. I don't think people have a good idea of how strong, how powerful that messaging is. These are the essential pipelines, not only into our living spaces, but into our inner sanctums, our brains. So many people, I mean, like, I remember back in like 2015, young kids, you'd show them a picture of Daniel Day-Lewis and they'd say, "Oh, that's Abraham Lincoln," I've thought to myself, I've thought to myself before, like, why do I have any idea? How is it that I, who was born in 1986, have any idea what it was like on the beaches of Normandy? Oh, well, because I watched Saving Private Ryan and all these other movies, and I have this very vivid. But there'd be no way for me to comprehend war at that level. So these images, right? And that's a magical tenet. That is a magical tenet. It's a foundational tenet of magic. Is images subtly change you. They influence you, and I think that a lot of that has happened. And the consequence of it now, to me, and I'd like to hear your take on this, is many of these trends are anti-human in their core.
Well, I mean, the media, we all know. I mean, it's cut to the point where it's cliche. The media is just propaganda. It has no truth in it at all. The media just is projecting a trauma loop on people all the time. They want you to get involved in the next trauma, the next thing. They get you addicted to the cycle. But it's who controls the narrative controls the world. Even at a personal level, we all have a story in our heads about our lives. So the narrative that is in our head, we project out. So whoever controls the narrative controls the populace. So you have to say, what is your own personal foundation? What is your own narrative that you go by in your own head? How do you view reality? And you don't let that outside influence get into the inside. And one of the things I tell people all the time is stop watching the news. The news is just corrupt. It's there to cause division. It's not there to inform. It's there to, what do they, when they refer to television, programming. It's the same thing in media. It's there to program you. First thing you should do, shut off your news feeds. Get away from it. Focus on your purpose. Focus on what you love to do. Because the media, again, is just there to disrupt you. It's not there to inform you.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that was one of the first things I realized was like I have to, in order to, I think one of the most important ways um to effectively eliminate that kind of junk food from your mental diet is to realize, right, that it's a humbling experience to say that, like, wow, a lot of my self-talk has nothing to do with me. I
Nothing.
mean, yeah, it's like this is all artifice. These things, these programs, like you're saying, these scripts, these narratives that I have in my head, they're not from me. They have nothing to do with me.
Well,
Yeah.
let's take a deeper step on that too. When you get so involved in the outside narrative, are those thoughts actually your thoughts? A lot of the thoughts that we have aren't even our own thoughts. It's past trauma, it's past narratives that we bring into the future, and we think that that is us. A lot of us, our own thoughts aren't ours. How do you know that you're having your own thoughts? Is it projecting your purpose? Is it projecting your will? Does it make you feel better? Does it make you feel as a better person, more effective? If it doesn't do that, those aren't your thoughts. Those are thoughts that are embedded in you. And smartphones, every 2 seconds, there's the next upgrade, there's the next news feed, there's the next, it just doesn't stop. I mean, like when I go to the gym, I don't take my phone. When I go for a walk, I don't take my phone. I have to have that hour or so where it's just not near me. Because, you keep having that where you don't have any peace and you can't center your mind. So that's one of the things people need to start asking themselves. And not being esoteric, but are these really your thoughts? Or is it outside influence that is feeding a trauma in you that isn't productive, that isn't helping you to move forward?
Hmm. Yeah, good points. Good points. One of the things that I was most eager to talk with you about because I'm a follower of your social medias, at Asunder Monk on Instagram. I follow you a lot there, and I see the content that you put it is very much encouraging towards, I would say, traditional but very healthy modes of masculinity, which is what young men, and by young men, I mean like, anybody under like 60, 70, like we need this stuff because it's corroded. It's gone really, really deep. So, but I also noticed that there's a lot of spirituality in what you do and the aesthetic and the message. And I think that message of hope that you put out there is inherently spiritual. But if we want to talk about modern masculinity, do you think there's a way to approach the mysteries or to approach spirituality that can help us heal as men?
Well, I mean, again, that's what I talked earlier about the fact what we're missing right now the most is mentorship. There's a huge shortage of mentorship. There's a huge shortage of, the elders. And because of that shortage is what we're going through right now. There's a lot of young men that grew up without fathers, and that's an issue. So they don't know how to, channel the masculinity because they were never exposed to it. We model our parents. So if we did not have that parental figure, we had no model. And then you get on social media when it comes to masculinity, it's like, okay, you have this red pill garbage, which is nothing but sewage. And then you get into hyper masculine culture, which, okay, cool, you're lifting weights, but are you looking at your own crap? So the shortage of wisdom, the elders going, I mean, like even my Instagram, the only reason why my Instagram is at all effective, because I spent years screwing up. And then I tell people, you don't want to do this because this is what's going to happen. And that's what young people need right now. Young women need the elders, young men need the elders. So I really think at the core of all is just a huge shortage of mentors and mentors that don't charge $150 an hour or tell you, here's my next course, buy this, but who authentically want to make a difference.
David, I want to ask you if you could talk about iron spikes and their meaning to you.
Iron spikes touch me a great deal. It goes back to an old folk practice. It goes back to old Scottish folk magic, but it's also a form of faith. They used to take the iron railroad spikes and they would put them around their house because it deflects evil. It's to protect against the demonic, you could say, or evil, whatever you want to refer to it as. So, they would put it around their house. They would put it on their fence posts, just like you would salt. But iron spikes mean a great deal to me also is because it represents protection, will, purpose, fortitude. I mean, in every room, I have an apartment now, but at least in my front room of my apartment and in my back bedroom, there's a spike. And when I see that iron spike, it reminds me to stay grounded, stay focused, don't be afraid. And with the spikes, I think it's important to get ones that are used because the kinetic energy of the train running over it, and the vibration, that kinetic energy is important also. But the spikes have always been important to me because, again, it is like a talisman. You look at it, people have a Bible in their house. It's like a talisman. They look at the Bible that grounds them. There's a painting that might ground them. For me, it's the iron spike. I see that and I go, okay, stay calm, stay focused, stay strong, move forward.
Yeah. So I wonder, you know, uh, do you have any advice for people looking to find their purpose? It's one of those things that's probably easier said than done. If there's somebody that has
Um,
struggled with a lot of issues, such as yourself, maybe they have, you know,
And
similar, PTSD, so on and so forth. But yeah, how were there any things that you can definitively say you can pinpoint that particularly for yourself, you can say this is one thing that definitely has put me on the right trajectory, and maybe it has to do with cultivating discipline, so on. But yeah, go on.
the question you can ask is this. It's a very simple question. What would you love to do if money was not an issue? What is it that you love to do if money was not the issue? That thing that you love to do, making music, dancing, doing art, lifting weights, building, carpentry, whatever that thing is that you love to do, that you're doing for free, that brings you pleasure, that gives you focus, that gives you purpose, that's your true will. See, people get too way esoteric with the true will, the holy guardian angel, all this esoteric stuff. No, it's what do you love to do? And that's constructive, that projects something positive into the world. Do you like working on cars? Are you a good mechanic? Well, that's projecting something positive. And that's all it is. The true will is doing what you feel you are called to do. But if you are focusing on, and I understand that money is needed, money is a tool, money is a message, thing of exchange. But if all you're worried about is making money, well, money comes and goes. But if you chase your purpose, money chases you. It's that simple.
What for you yourself, was it difficult for you to find your true purpose and your true will, or how did that all come about for yourself?
Yeah, it was honestly, it was a journey. I mean, I did private security. I was a DOT officer. I did a lot of vocations. But around 2012, when I started doing the outreach work, I enjoyed it because I could take my issues, I could take my pain and take my story and deal with people who had also had the same issues and make a difference. And let me say this too, because it's that thing where, oh, I want to be a good person. No, I was never interested in being a good person. I'm interested in being an effective person. Because you can be a good person and sit on your couch all day and just be nice and do nothing. I'm not interested in that. You want to be an effective person. And being an effective person is honing your purpose.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even look at somebody like Bukowski, right? I mean, he transmuted his pain into writing, and years after his death, we're still quoting him. He's really made quite a comeback, right? I think for a little while he got lumped in with the Beats. I've always found him to be a little bit.
The Beats, he hated the Beats.
Yeah, I found him to be way outside of the Beats because Bukowski was so real, whereas like the Beats appeal more to like a 19-year-old, and then eventually you're like, oh, these guys were full of shit. you know,
Well, Bukowski didn't get his first paying job till he was 49. He worked at the post office. He got his first contract for a book and he made $12,000 off it when he was 49.
Wow.
So he was if you read post office, if you read, if you read about the stories of different jobs he had, and, he always worked until he could make writing a vocation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it takes time. I mean, I turned 60, so maybe I finally made it and figuring out what my purpose is. But even the adjustment coming down here, I came from Cleveland to, Fayetteville, Georgia.
How long ago did that happen?
3 weeks ago. And it's a culture shock. It took me time to adjust, but it's a culture shock in a good way. But that's another thing too. When you're moving forward, you can't bring the old you into where you're going. So I couldn't bring that guy from Cleveland whose head was on swivel, who was always stressed to do the work here. You have to identify and evolve with the direction you're going. That's
Yeah.
another thing too, is like, how do you identify with what you're doing? What is your identity? And that's a part of your true will, it's making a declaration, I always use that Bible verse also. It says, so is the words that go from my mouth. they shall not return void, but has and will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I've sent it. That is an invocation of your purpose and your will, believing that you are already there, that you are doing it now.
Yeah, that's actually that brings me to a question that I wanted to ask you. You know, you've mentioned the Bible, you've mentioned scripture, you've mentioned Lucifer, which is a characteristically Judeo-Christian figure. You've mentioned faith, you've mentioned God. What part does God or faith, what part does that play in your life and in you know your path, what you're doing?
I can say this, the bottom that I hit in 2000 and between 2008 and 2010, um, it's that when you're on the floor moment, you have nowhere else to go, you've lost everything, and you go, God help me, that's the only way I'm going to get out of this. You know, we talk about in AA, it's a surrender to something higher than you. And, you know, we have that moment when we're on the floor and we go, well, great, my best thinking got me here. I remember in 2008 when I was in a mental institution, I was locked up for 10 days. And I remember they gave me an IQ test, you know, a cognitive test. And there was this young, very enthusiastic little therapist, you know. I still remember her name. Her name was Connie. And she came up to me and she goes, my God, Dave, you have an IQ of 140. And I looked at her and said, I'm in a nut house. The janitor goes home tonight. I stay here. My best thinking got me there. When we have those moments when we're broken on the floor, we have nothing left, and you think this is it, that's when you know you need something higher than you. And that was my God moment. So no, I'm not no holy roller, but I know I'm here right now because of God's grace and a lot of work.
I want to ask you, doing these outreach programs and whatnot that you do, I wonder if there are any common themes or any common patterns that you see with the individuals that you counsel. Is it kind of all across the board, or are there certain things in particular that you seem to be identifying as things that people are commonly, consistently struggling with?
Most of the people under 40, there's a parent that was missing in their life. There were poverty issues. There's issues with loneliness. There's issues with rejection. But of all the things, especially the last 4 years, the thing that keeps circulating over and over again with people is they're just alone. They're terribly alone. And even with the counseling work I did, you know, I didn't believe in the toxic positivity of going, hey, it's going to be okay. You're a good person, because that's all garbage. That fixes nothing. You have to sit in the room with that person in their pain until they're ready to come out. It's that simple. There is no miracle cures. And some people take a lot longer than others. And sadly, a lot of people are addicted to their pain too. Even when I was doing the work back in Cleveland, you know, there were people I worked with that did commit suicide. So it was just a matter of going, okay, you can't save the world, but you have to be willing to sit in the dark place with that person. That's all you can do at the time. That's it. There's no miracle cures. You know, people want the miracle cure. They want the fast way out. There is no fast way out. There are no shortcuts. When you're dealing with your trauma and pain, you have to work through it and then move forward. And then the way you empower yourself is to help others with their pain.
Yeah, I think I really resonate with what you said about that the incidents of you know coming from broken homes. I mean, I did, and I very much like you. I had to really step step is putting it lightly. I was up to my neck and shit. And I in order to pull myself out. Uh, and you know, again, like it's just going back to the a few of the things that we've already talked about, the sort of corrosion of the of family values. I talk to a lot of people now, or I just hear peripherally, like everybody seems to think, and don't get me wrong, yeah, it happened, of course, but everybody seems to think that like all marriages in the 50s were abusive. All traditional sort of things are had like some sort of really dark, seedy underbelly that nobody just ever talked about. And I'll be honest, like the people in my life who have been just the easiest and have really, really helped me, had a really strong effect in my life, I've noticed have had either the kind of pain that like you've been through or really good parents. They tend to be very easy people to deal with and to they've helped me cope. But not just cope, they've helped me sort of they've climbed the ladder with me. Those are the people who have taught me how to do simple things that I couldn't do, like have a bank account with something in it for more than a month. Get a car and license plates and keep it. And pay my insurance on time. Like it's those types of people that are just seem like they things come a little easier to them, and I think it has to do with the fact that they don't have the same trauma of having like no dad or no mom. That's just anecdotal, but it has been my experience.
That's something that cannot be dismissed. I mean, the nuclear family and whatever you want to describe the nuclear family is. But when one of the parents are missing, there can be an issue because what happens is when one parent is out of the picture, the other parent is most stressed out. I mean, I lost my dad when I was 17. I mean, I was a young man, but I could see the significant stress on my mom when my father died. It was significant. And, I had to step up real quick, real fast to fill that gap. So I can't even imagine what it's like to, be missing a mother your whole life or a father your whole life, or in some cases, both parents. So it's not to be dismissed. But again, the answer is, and it's very simple, if you have the opportunity to interact with somebody who is missing a parent, if you can even give them 15 minutes of time, talk to them, encourage them,
Yeah.
see them. That's another thing too. The reason why people feel so alone is because they're not seen. I mean, I sit here, like I get irritated sometimes when I go to the gym because I see like half the people doing this in the gym in place of looking at each other. We don't even see each other. We're looking at our phones all the time. We shouldn't be looking at this all the time. We should be looking around at the people around us, noticing them. I've said before, if you want to do something really effective, if you want to be a really effective magician or teacher or mentor, find somebody who's alone and make them feel less alone. That's some real power right there. And even in the work that I did in the past with counseling, don't be afraid to get offended because people are going to offend you because people are hurting. Mm-hmm. If you get offended immediately, then you're just making it about you. You don't want to make a difference.
You're well said, man. Yeah, and I think what's interesting to me, I also grew up in a house full of women. I grew up with my grandmother, my sister, and my mother. Um, I'm wondering, like, before your dad passed away, did he kind of give you that foundation of how healthy masculinity, and if not, or if yes, and then it continued to develop, how was that dynamic with the women that you grew up with? Were they able to impart certain things to you that helped you as a man, or?
Well, I was fortunate that I had two men that were very influential in my life. One was my father, my other was my Uncle Cleve. And when my father did die, my uncle did step up and help a great deal. So he was there for me. So I did have some positive male role models. So I was very fortunate in that. But in terms of the women in my life, my mom, I always say, like, if you're a guy and you live in a house and there's no woman in the house, you're just basically a guy living in a house. A woman makes it a home.
Mm.
She's the heart of the home. And we've dismissed this role of the woman, oh, well, and she cooks and she wants to be a homemaker. That's sacred work. That's sacred work. To be able to work all day and come home to some type of a sanctuary where, there's a woman there, she's taking care of things, you don't feel alone. That's sacred, important work. That's the work that's been dismissed. Young women right now, they don't need social media influencers. They need that mother figure. They need the elder that's going to sit down with them and talk to them and tell them, hey, you don't need to do this. You don't need to be this way.
Yeah, I think everybody, I see a lot now, people like they want to connect with Hecate and they want to these dark kind of powerful goddesses, but sacred. The one that was constantly talked about, the one who was one of the original 12 Olympians, and any city had to have a fire to her. Any city in Greece was Estia, the goddess of the hearth and home, because of exactly what you're saying. There is no point in doing anything. There's no point in going out and bringing home the bacon if there's no home to bring it to.
Period. Period. It's that simple. It's you know, I you see it. You could tell a home where a guy's married because if you walk into the home, there's no sense of the guy even lives there. He might have his room in the garage, his room in the basement, whatever, but he's happy with that because he gave her a home. She's the, you know,
Was
I'm a single guy. I live in an apartment. I live in an apartment. I'm grateful to have it. It's not a home, it's a roof. But it's that balance that makes it a home.
Yeah, I right now my fiance's away on a family trip, and I talked to her yesterday. I'm like, she's like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Good, but this place is basically a museum without you." You know,
I'm grateful for the place that I have, but it's still just, me walking around an apartment. You
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and I had plenty of years of that too. I was also talking to somebody recently. That dynamic that you're talking about, the polarities that need to be balanced in order to move things forward, it is getting lost. And I want to see if you agree with kind of, my thoughts on this, and maybe we could open up a conversation a little deeper around this. Guys have a vertical sort of hierarchy of priorities, right? And that's why we don't need to be, I have no interior desire to be egalitarian. Zero. I don't care if like the people over there don't have. I don't care because my priorities are in making sure the people around me, the people that I am responsible for, um, will flourish because I know that that has a ripple effect. That if the people near me are taken care of and their needs are taken care of and they're not just, but that kind of network is the only sustainable method. Now, women that I've seen, that I grew up with, that I live with, I've lived with, and now I live with a woman. I've really spent very little time living with men, but they seem to have more of a horizontal hierarchy of priorities. But the interesting thing is that women are they can give us sort of, what and who we love tends to be higher at vertical sort of hierarchy of priorities. So the wife or the mother of my children, my daughter, my kids, my home, my job, my community. And I feel like when I didn't have that impetus, and I'm a much younger man. I'm technically a millennial, so I really devolved into postmodern nihilism for many, many years. But like that priority list was for a long time for me was like beer and like food and getting laid. And that was it. Until I kind of, you know, was introduced to really a healthy male female dynamic.
Well, I mean, we also, they talk about sowing your wild oats. I mean, I used to do drug extractions, going to houses. 45-year-old guy without no teeth in his mouth, who at one time was the cool guy. Now he's the weirdo in the corners. So it's like, it's cool to sow your wild oats, but one day you're going to wake up and you're 40 and 50 years old and go, what has happened to my life? What did I do? And you don't want to be that person. And something that you said was very important too. I want to touch on that. You talked about your circle. I remember when I was living in Cleveland, there was a guy a couple doors down from me. He would always brag about, going on his mission trips, to other countries. I would tell him, I said, I'm not impressed. I go, you're flying over poverty to go to another country when people around you are starving. People down the street from you are starving. Like right now, I'm sitting here in this room with the people that helped me to do the podcast. They're my inner circle. They're going to come before everything else. That's the thing when people make the mistake. It's like, you want to save the world, start with the people around you and work your way out. This thing about, I'm going to go out there and bring it in, that's nonsense. Everything goes from within out, circles within circles within circles. People want to skip steps. It's like, I'm not being rude, but I don't care what happens in other countries. I care about the people around. Voltaire say, take care of your own garden. Don't worry about everybody else's. Mm. So what's your garden? People around you.
Tend to the part of the garden that you could touch. Yes. I wanted to ask you if there is any advice or any insights that you would have in regards to individuals that are having a struggle with cultivating discipline within themselves. Is it something that, are there any things in particular that you can point to that you can say, these are definitely things that would point you in the right direction?
I do want to touch on something when it comes to people that are maybe considered to be having issues. What we have seen in the past 4 years is a crossover of boundaries that were not necessary. And what I mean by this is, I'm going to touch on this delicately, but you remember the idea of the hermaphrodite in magic or in faith, the sacred priest or priestess. Mm-hmm. And you have a lot of people that are transgender, and some are suffering greatly. And some are, evil people, and some are good people, just like in any other culture. But you do have people that are feeling alienated. If we forget about the people like, Freddie Mercury and David Bowie, who are androgynous. So if you have somebody who's a young man who is androgynous, you don't want to belittle them. You want them to make them feel loved because they have an artistic soul. So you don't want to diminish that. But then there you have what's gone across the board a little too far, is when you've got a guy that's, 250 pounds in a sundress and a beard that wants to go in a woman's bathroom. Well, the thing is, those are two separate things. Those are two separate mindsets. And what I see now is there is a lot of hatred towards transgender people. But let's not get transgenderism mixed up with androgyny, because some people are just very creative and that's how they express themselves. So there's a fine line between the artistic expression and being a deviant. Both of those things are being seen the same way, and they're not the same way. So I think that needs to be looked at too, like young people that are, and I'm not for like people transitioning when they're 13 and 14 years old. Those are children. But if you have a young adult who is androgynous, is going through issues, don't reject them, don't belittle them, find out what's going on with them. Is this the way they express themselves creatively and artistically? Because there's a lot of people in that arena that are committing suicide right now because they're not being heard and they're all being lumped into the same thing, and that's wrong.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about it recently, like as almost people talk about gender spectrums, and I think that there is a spectrum of the expression of masculinity. Some of the things that we talked about that you mentioned earlier, those essential qualities of male female. Um, I kind of think of them as like primary colors, right? Like primary yellow. And then from that, you get a whole like spectrum of different kinds of yellow. There are set that generate secondary, generates tertiary. Um, and yeah, at the fringes, it really deviates from the archetype of sacred masculinity. But myself as a musician and as an artist, I do understand. I'm very heavy in the traditional stuff right now because I feel like I have to be that voice at this point. But I know what it's like to, you know, I know what it's like to be I have an effeminate influence,
Yes.
on you because that's really truly is what it is. People confuse it. Effeminacy is not femininity. There are men who are a little bit more effeminate, and that's like just less burly masculine archetype. And believe it or not, I mean, for in my teens and things like that, and I had to work towards embodying more of the masculinity because it made me a little bit more effective. But if I had somebody who like beat that out of me, I don't know what I would have done with my creativity. I would have exploded. It would have been much worse, I think, than it actually was. So I'm glad you point that out. I want to give you some time here towards the end of our hour to plug anything that you've got going on and to talk about any of the things and people that you're working with.
I'm very fortunate right now. And by the way, thank you for this opportunity. I'm very grateful. I'm working right now with Thomas Global Media, and we are launching the Enrichment Network in February. And the podcast I'm going to be doing is called The Strength Within. I'm still going to be doing my Instagram work also. My Instagram is more of a private personal page, but the Enrichment Network it's going to be on Amazon, Roku, Apple TV. It's got a huge reach. And what we're trying to do here is to just help people, encourage them. There's different people, different podcasters with different formats. Mine is going to be more of the masculine culture, helping people like what I'm doing now. And then we have a woman named Deborah who works with children, and she's a nurturer and she's a teacher and she's incredible. So I'm moving forward. By God's grace, I'm evolving into a new stage of work right now, and I'm just really grateful. But if people want to get a hold of me, they can get through a Sundermonk on Instagram. That's how they can reach me directly. And then in February, when this launches, I'll get a wider reach to be able to help people. I'm just really grateful to be able to do it.
Yeah, and we're grateful for your work, brother. I mean, it's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you tonight, and I hope it's the first of many.
Thank
Definitely.
you. I
Yeah,
definitely appreciate the
David, you have
opportunity.
an important voice, and I think you're doing important work. So, yeah, I would just like to extend my appreciation and thank you.
Thank you, guys. I really do appreciate this opportunity. Appreciate your work also.
Excellent. Well, with that being said, then, is there any last thoughts that you have, David? Anything else, anything at all that you'd like to share with anybody? Put out there before we close it out.
Um, if I can help you, if you want to reach out through Instagram, I'll try to get to people if I can help them. But like I close all my podcasts, be well, be blessed, and thank you.
Beautiful. All right, brother. Well, until next time,
Take
farewell.
care.